Connotations is a collection of memories, observations, and tiny bits of historical naval lint served up by Dr. Lee Konowe.
Before getting into this episode's nitty-gritty, I'd like to ask you to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Costs you nothing, but it'll make a huge difference for my production of these episodes. Also, a bit more about Joseph Konowe, about whom so few knew, but whose lives were touched by his very presence, often. My dad was the oldest of 4 brothers and a sister, born in the Bronx, as was I, essentially, to Romanian immigrant parents. He was born on the traditional Columbus Day, October 12th. Like most immigrant families, particularly Romanian families, his was poor, and the Great Depression occurred just about as he attended high school. Being the oldest, and with no chance to pursue his dream of becoming a doctor, Dad took the only job offered, that of a grocery store bicycle delivery boy. Now, given that Dad had severely crossed left eye, amblyopia, his bicycle riding came slowly and probably painfully, but he persevered. As we'll see in a later episode, his vision did not prove valuable when he volunteered to serve in the military. Having been raised by an atheist and socialist-leaning father, my dad soon found himself much more comfortable in the role of a union organizer, and his 60-year career began. Well, began might be replaced with the punishment of such an effort, as in those days, being beaten by factory-hired gangs and too frequently being arrested afterwards was more the average day of an organizer. Aren't you glad you're not one? But he believed in what he was doing, and for whom he suffered the consequences. So very slowly and painfully, he made his way. As we'll later detail, your life must have had meaning if Jack Nicholson stars in a movie with my dad's character as his number 1. Teaser time. For right now, however, we are here to discuss another one Bernie Spindell. How come you don't recognize this person's name? Yet I have him on my well-known list. Well, let's find out. Bernie Spindell was probably the most famous or infamous wiretapper of all times. My father was a client of Bernie, but I considered him a friend, and more accurately, a model of someone I might become. Bernie, by the way, died on February 3rd, 1971. Very early, but more on that later. He was only 48 at the time of his death and a patient at Putnam Community Hospital. In 1955, Bernie was quoted in Collier's magazine as saying, quote, "I'm a wiretapper. I'm also an electronic eavesdropper. I practice an art which has progressed so far in the last 10 years that few people, if any, are entirely safe from the prying ears of snoopers like me," or him. While correct, this self-suggested a little of his actual skill set. Also a pilot, Bernie at the time of his death already had a 36-year career behind him, beginning by tapping his first Bronx girlfriend, and not only tapped phones, landlines as we now call them, but invented many of the techniques and the equipment that permitted wiretapping to move along. I came to know Bernie in about 1956 when I was about 12 years old, and he was hired to assist my father and Dad's boss, International Brotherhood of Teamsters president, Jimmy Hoffa. Yeah, that Jimmy Hoffa. The picture of me in front of my bedroom closet, which should be showing, will prove much more significant shortly. As Bernie had a home in upstate Hope, New York, where he, his wife, and 7 kids and 4 horses lived, the trip from Hope to New York, no implications intended, was quite long and the family quite large. Bernie was offered a significant freezer space in our large fridge in the garage to store large meat orders and such, which he later would pick up and transfer home. Typical for my father. This arrangement is what placed Bernie at my house with some fair frequency and permitted our relationship to develop. At this stage, I was into electronic kit building. Night kits and Lafayette radio stores were my hangouts, and I had a fledgling understanding of what made circuits tick. So, periodically, Bernie would appear at our home, usually on a weekend day, and if it was these brief breaks in his trip that would yield instructional time for me. Initially, Bernie would always interrogate. Guys in this business had many special terms. Our 2 landlines and the phones attached for any signs of being compromised. Yet another special word. In the homes of most normal teenagers, definitely not me, the second line was usually just for the parents, so they could receive and make calls without a phone war with their offspring. In my home, these 2 lines were entirely separate, with line 2 ending in the number 2680, being used for business calls exclusively. By the way, if one is looking for any evidence that my interest was more than just skin deep, I was and am able to recall my very first phone number from the age of 3, Olinville 4, 2022. So anyway, these visits with Bernie and his love for kids allowed for a tutor-student relationship to develop. I would show Bernie my latest Rube Goldberg addition to my room, and he would endeavor to show me how to make and use a bug. And we're not talking about this guy. Mostly, this process, bugging that is, simply involved replacing the standard phone microphone insert with one that appeared to be identical, but able to remotely be activated even when the phone headset was in the cradle. And in this way, conversations from the same room, that phone could be heard remotely and recorded. Remember, 1956. There were also a few lessons on how to detect others tapping into our phone lines, and this was equally enticing to me. Bernie would drag me in his equipment case from room to the smallest areas of our basement, and yes, the attic. There was, of course, a lot more to learn, and I paid far more intense interest and attention to these lessons than I did in school, except for staring at my gorgeous 5th grade classmate, Vicky D. Even at this early age, my burgeoning interest in females, pun intended, was quickly developing. Another pun intended. Apparently, there was one other motivator for Bernie's visits: my bedroom closet. Remember, I did say this part was coming. So, this closet housed very few clothes and other more typical apparel, and yes, some number of science projects and related objects. However, the most significant set of items in my closet were our family movie rolls, and they were in the center to the left, and at least 10 large reels of audio tape in metal cans. Each of these tapes had been placed in my closet by Bernie, but always when I was off somewhere and otherwise occupied. Each of these cans had 1 to 2 inch medical adhesive labels, which served the purpose of holding the cans closed. So they were extremely difficult to open, even with the tape removed, and had pen inscriptions that appeared to relate to their content. I can remember seeing 2 cans with the label Batista and Castro, and was certainly aware of their Cuban significance. I did not, however, realize at the time that Bernie indeed had worked for both sides, and that he most likely came very close to ending his career and life in Cuba. Remember, I suggested that there were about 10 cans, and we've only thus far accounted for 2 of them. Not having 10-to-10 reel-to-reel playback ability, and most assuredly not willing to violate Bernie's privacy, I limited myself to only cursory glances at some of the other labels. Beyond that, I treated the right side of my closet as sacred ground. What became clear in the years leading up to Bernie's death was that this group of tapes in a teen's closet represented Bernie's insurance policy, or at least one of several. Certainly, Bernie treated my father as more than a client, but then, as you will hear in the many episodes ahead, my father generated unusually strong relationships with just about every person he ever met. What happened to that tape repository? I actually have no idea. Safe to say that at some point, after I married in 1967 and subsequently moved into my own home, the tapes left my closet and were either sequestered in a new location or destroyed. Here are Life and Bernie's only printed words on that subject from a Life magazine story. Whatever the esteem which his clients hold him, Bernie claims to have a vault full of vital tape recordings within easy access of his beneficiaries, just in case his confidence should prove to be poorly placed. Quote, just say, I'm well insured, end quote, Bernie said. Had Bernie removed them? Had my father returned or destroyed them? I have no answer for that portion of the mystery. However, had my father returned them, I feel pretty sure he would have told me, and he never did so. With regard to Bernie's death, I can tell you now that my father did not accept the multiple heart attack story and did suggest to me that Bernie had quite a few enemies in the mob world, but Dad also felt, rightfully or not, that the FBI might have been somehow involved. Certainly, Bernie had many opportunities to embarrass the feds and was not particularly shy about doing so. I'll end this episode with yet another teaser regarding 2 other cans of tape. As I recall it, one can's label only had 2 letters, M and M. The other was something like other side or maybe bad side, but I'm very unsure of that reference. So closets seem to have played a significant role in my early years, and you might expect 1 or more episodes to include yet more of them. I'll make you a deal, though. You whack the subscribe button, and I'll start on the next episode. Seems fair to me.